guys? UFC on Fox 4 was this weekend, and it had a lot of light heavyweight fights, so I figured this is a good time to do some light heavyweight power rankings. Number one, easy, obvious choice, Jon Jones. He's a light heavyweight champion, one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. He's got a big fight coming up with Dan Henderson, who I have at number 2. And if he wins this fight, especially if it's a finish, I would be moving him up to number 2 in the pound-for-pound rankings. I'd have him just behind Anderson Silva, and I would move him ahead of George St. Pierre, who hasn't fought in, I think, over a year. And just due to inactivity and just Jones' impressive run, I'd have him as the number 2 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. And he's quickly approaching number 1 with this just crazy streak he's on of dominant wins over big names. So easy choice for number 1 in the light heavyweight. Number 2, like I said, Dan Henderson, who's on a great streak of his own. He's got wins over Fedor Emelianenko, considered the greatest heavyweight fighter of all time. And Mauricio Shogun Rua, one of the greatest light heavyweights of all time. That fight against Shogun, just an absolute classic, you know, and Dan Henderson looked dominant early on, just pounded Shogun. Shogun came back and looked equally dominant in the end, having him in mount for most of the 5th round, but Dan ended up winning the decision. So I have him at number 2. Number 3, I have Mauricio Shogun Rua, who had another big win this Saturday over Brandon Vera. Vera, who'd been struggling lately, he came to fight, and he put on an impressive fight, puts big shots on Shogun, but Shogun came out on top, TKO'd him in the 4th round. He looked good, he looked his usual good self, he took some punishment, and he gave it back, and he ended up getting the win. You just can't count this guy out unless he's fighting Jon Jones, who just obliterated him. At number 4, I have Lyoto Machida. Big win this Saturday over Ryan Bader. Looked absolutely dominant. He made Bader look like an amateur, and clearly Bader is not. He'd been impressive himself recently. You know, big, strong wrestler, and Machida just danced around him, waved his hands, and then knocked him out. Big win for him. He's next in line for a title shot. He'll get the winner of Dan Henderson versus Jon Jones. And, you know, he gave Jon Jones trouble in their fight, and if they fight again, I think he is going to compete. I would have to favor Jones if they fought, but, you know, I think Machida can compete with him. He's probably the best shot of the current crop of fighters of beating Jon Jones. And against Henderson, I would actually favor Machida, as I think his skill set just matches up very well with Hendo. And at number 5, I have Rashad Evans. And prior to his title loss, I had him as the 2nd best light heavyweight in the world. And, you know, that one loss shouldn't drop you that far, but it just shows you how much movement there is behind Jones. You know, all these other guys have been so impressive since then. You know, like I said, Hendo's got the win over Shogun and over Fedor. Shogun just got another big win. And Lyoto just got a big win. So, you know, one loss can just drop you pretty far in this division when you're in this tight mix. But it's a pretty big gap between number 1 and the rest of them. Jon Jones right now is so far ahead of everybody else, I think. And coming in at number 6, I have Phil Davis, who he had a fight as well Saturday, and it ended in a no contest. He poked the other fighter in the eye. I can't even remember the guy's name. Prado, I think is his last name. He poked him in the eye, and the guy couldn't continue, so it was ruled a no contest. They'll fight again later in the future. But Phil Davis, it's crazy, he was on the undercard. In his last fight prior to that, you know, he was in a title eliminator against Rashad Evans for a shot at Jon Jones. And now he's on the undercard, because that fight against Rashad Evans was just a stinker. It was not an exciting fight. Fans didn't like it. I'm guessing that's what happened. And, you know, of course, Rashad Evans, he's not going to get dropped to the undercard because he's from the Ultimate Fighter. He's a big name. But Phil Davis, he got dropped to the undercard. Not good for him. But I do believe he will continue to compete. He's a young guy. He's got a lot of talent. He's going to come back. And I expect we'll see him in contention again in the future. Number 7, I have Alexander Gustafsson, who his last fight was a big win over Thiago Silva on, I think it was on UFC on Fuel, and it was impressive. This guy's been very impressive lately. I think he's 25 years old. I think he's only got 1 loss to his record, and I believe it was to Phil Davis. And this is a guy to look out for. After Lyoto Machida, he might have 1 more fight, and then he could be in line for a title shot himself. At number 8, I have Ryan Bader, who did get knocked out by Machida this past Saturday at UFC on Fox 4. But prior to that, he won 2 in a row. He's looking pretty good right now, except for that loss to Machida. He did not look good there. But that was a horrible matchup, as I said in my predictions for him, because he's a wrestler. Machida doesn't get taken down very often. Machida's fast, and he just got knocked out for his trouble. But, again, another guy, you know, he's in his prime. I believe we'll see more of him in the future. I expect to see him in more big fights. At number 8, no, that was number 8. At number 9, I have Antonio Rogerio Nogueira. You know, this is a guy who's been around for a long time, always competes, got some big wins. He's had a couple losses, had some close losses. I think he lost to Bader. But his last fight, I believe, was against Tito Ortiz, who he TKO'd. So, you know, this is a guy who's always going to be around, always going to be a tough guy, probably a top 10 guy. No different now. At number 10, I have Forrest Griffin. He's not getting a lot of respect anymore. He got a lot of hype after the Ultimate Fighter and after winning the title against Rampage, but as soon as he lost it, it's like he disappeared off the map. And I've never really been big on his game, but now I feel he's being underestimated. He does have big wins in his career, the win against Rampage, the win against Shogun, and he's won 3 of his last 4, I think, and 2 of them against Tito Ortiz, but he has a nice win against Rich Franklin, who's been pretty good lately as well. So I don't think he's a guy who's going to beat any of the top 5 guys in the division right now, but against any of the bottom 5 in the top 10, I do believe he could compete. Well, that's my top 10 in the light heavyweight division. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment or a video response, and if you like these videos, please subscribe.